Okay, let's speak to Natasha Hausdorff, barrister specialising in international law, who's also the legal director of UK Lawyers for Israel for the Israel Charitable Trust. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning, Matt.
It's good to have you on the programme. So what do you think of this arrest warrant? Give us your view as a lawyer.
Well, I'm bound to say, as a lawyer, I disagree entirely with Sir Geoffrey's remarks, and I hope that there'll be a similar amount of time afforded to a response. What we've seen coming out of the ICC on Thursday is unfortunately reflection of the politicisation and weaponisation of this particular international legal body, seemingly to target the Jewish state. And the reason I say that is because these arrest warrants have now been issued despite an absence of jurisdiction, in breach of the court's own rules.
So when you mean by despite an absence of jurisdiction, what do you mean by that?
Well, can I just set out some of the issues here? And then absolutely, I welcome the opportunity to go into them in more detail. But jurisdiction is a critical problem, which we absolutely need to come on to. But there's also the breach of the court's rules. And you referenced the principle of complementarity. What thereafter followed was a total inversion of the burden of evidence here. Again, something that we've seen consistently coming out of the current prosecutor, Karim Khan, a requirement that Israel both prove its innocence, but also in this respect, prove its ability to try its own people. Israel is a democracy. It is a country with a robust legal system, and it prizes the rule of law. There's no indication that credible allegations would not be tried. And indeed, there are ongoing cases on individual instances where allegations have been raised against individual soldiers. But the critical piece of the puzzle here is the misinformation or false information that this decision has been predicated on. Now, I don't know if Sir Geoffrey has in fact read any of the information that was provided to the pre-trial chamber. His remarks indicate to me that he perhaps hasn't, because within the submissions of friends to the court, one in particular by the high-level military group, a group of military experts who've been on the ground in Gaza, but also by UK Lawyers for Israel, the organisation I'm involved in, showed that the information the prosecutor had provided was not only entirely inaccurate and deficient, but also put forward false reports that had subsequently been debunked, including on starvation by the Famine Review Committee, but also that it was predicated on the sort of misreporting that we've heard coming out of Gaza, which is a reflection of much of the propaganda coming out of this internationally prescribed terrorist organisation.
Well, yes.
Very important to bear in mind the inaccurate information, and rather than acknowledging the deficiencies, what the prosecutor in fact did, which is utterly extraordinary, was say to the court, ignore any submissions on accuracy from anyone except the information that I've put before you. And that has also led to a subsequent complaint by UK Lawyers for Israel against the prosecutor for breaches of his professional obligations. Coming to the question of jurisdiction, the reason there is no jurisdiction here is because Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute. Neither, of course, as part of your previous discussion, is the US. There are clear reasons for that, because even at the drafting stage of the Rome Statute, it was clear there was going to be a political agenda pursued through this court. And that was evident from some of the crimes included in Article 8 and the drafting associated with those. But the way that the court has tried to shoehorn this situation into its ambit is through deciding that for the purposes of this exercise, it can determine the existence of a state of Palestine. That is contrary to settled international law on the matter. The characteristics of statehood are very well established, also reflected in the Montevideo Convention criteria. But it's also contrary to the very document, the very international agreement that established the Palestinian Authority that purported to join the court. And this was the subject of the submission that the UK was proposing to make to the ICC, explaining why it was concerned that the court was proceeding in a situation where it had no jurisdiction. That was, if you remember, the U-turn that this government made a few days before that submission was supposed to go in, deciding that it wasn't going to follow up with its request to submit on this question. So all of those things considered together, we're seeing lack of jurisdiction, breach of the court rules, and a decision that has now been made on the basis of proven false information by independent third parties. All of this indicates that the court is simply seeking to rehabilitate itself. This is a court that has been subject to resounding criticism since its establishment. All of the lofty ideals that Sir Geoffrey articulated have not been made out through this court's activity. It has gone almost exclusively after African defendants.
Yeah.
And now it is seeking to jump on the bandwagon against the only Jewish state in order to try and win back some of the international popularity, which it has very rightly lost over the last 20 years.
Okay, we're going to... Natasha, you've given one of the longest answers in the history of this programme, and I allowed you to have your say, and that was, I think it was about 4.5 minutes or so, and that's it. You set out your stall, very clearly. Just a couple of things, if I may. When it comes to independent reporting, from the Gaza Strip, I mean, one of the problems is that, of course, Israel has not allowed foreign journalists like myself to go into the Gaza Strip and find out for themselves what is actually going on.
I think you'll find that's no longer the case. As the military situation
you can go and you can be embedded with the IDF and go in for a couple of hours. Many colleagues have done that, but you're not free to talk to whoever you want to talk to. So as far as I know, and I don't think this has changed, there is no independent reporting from outsiders allowed inside the Gaza Strip.
I'm surprised that you would call colleagues who have embedded with the Israeli army for their own security, seeking to report,
but they can't,
not independent as a result of that.
Well, they're not entirely independent because they can't just, they're told very specifically, and I know this, because I've talked to the people who've done it, they're told very specifically they cannot, wander off and talk to whoever they see, crossing the street or doing whatever they're doing. They can't do it. That is just a fact.
Zone, Matt,
I know.
Which I know because I've been on the ground there.
I have been to many active war zones, including Ukraine, where you are free to talk to anyone, and you do that at your own risk. And we would very much, those of us who are foreign journalists would very much like to go in and do some proper independent reporting inside the Gaza Strip. We know that entails various risks, but I think that can be up to the organizations themselves to decide whether they're going to take those or not. Just on the the particular accusations leveled against the Israeli government. I mean, it is not just Israeli politicians who have an arrest warrant out against them. It is also senior Hamas leaders. I mean, 2 of them are already dead. They've been killed by the Israelis. Mohammed Deif may or may not be dead, but he's also got an arrest warrant.
Hamas confirmed some 3 weeks ago that he was dead. So again, I mean, this is another aspect that we perhaps should be talking about.
Are you saying it's a gratuitous inclusion of his name on the list of arrest warrants?
Well,
even though he's
certainly,
dead?
To feign some sort of even-handedness here, which in and of itself, of course, draws a morally repugnant equivalence between democratically elected and accountable leaders of the State of Israel, who, as I have indicated, are being subject to smears with no factual basis to these allegations, as against an internationally prescribed terrorist organization. And the only arrest warrant that they purported to order was against a dead man.
Just another one, because we're running slightly out of time. Anti-Semitic. Do you agree that this arrest warrant, as the Israeli government has claimed, is anti-Semitic?
Well, on the basis of everything that I have set out in my necessarily long answer, the fact that at every level, this is a decision which has been predicated on a breach of the court's own rules, on the law of jurisdiction, on international law that is applicable here, including the law of armed conflict, which Israel has been complying with.
Has it been? That's the question, isn't it? Has it been complying with
the assessment certainly of the UK government and of the American government, those that have looked at the information that Israel has provided on proportionality, on targeting, has consistently been that it is complying with IHL. So the allegations that have been set out, as I say, that have now been very clearly in the public arena debunked, and that are also fall down in the face of other publicly available information, over 1 million tons, 1,138,847 tons of aid facilitated by Israel into the Gaza Strip. The allegation that crossings were closed by Israel, which is put forward by the prosecutor, is simply untrue. So yes, where one sees untrue allegations being advanced to an illegal, unlawful issuance of arrest warrants against the leaders of the only Jewish state, then this allegation of anti-Semitism ultimately makes its own self out.
Is it not possible for Israeli politicians to commit crimes against humanity, regardless of their ethnic and religious origin? They are just politicians acting in bad faith.
And I do believe you're now putting words in my mouth.
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering. I'm asking as a principle.
Well, as a principle, of course, anyone is capable. But what we have seen here is that these allegations are essentially the modern blood libel. The ancient blood libel accused Jews of killing Christian children for their blood. The modern one accuses Jewish soldiers, Israelis, of killing Palestinian children. They are equally as unfounded. And where a modern blood libel forms the basis of arrest warrants against Jewish leaders, and this is, of course, at the expense of real situations of war crimes that the court has refrained from investigating, then yes, the overriding impression of that, and this is the court as a whole that has been called anti-Semitic on that basis, is that that must be the reasoning and the motivation in order for this court to seek to rehabilitate itself in the public arena. But it has fundamentally been made on the basis by 3 judges who have been entirely misled by this false information in front of them.
Okay, listen, there are so many other questions I could ask you, and I would like to ask you, including blood libel, the issue of whether if there had been an investigation into the origins of October the 7th or security lapses, as well as the conduct of the war, this might have satisfied the issue of complementarity of the court, etc., etc. But I've given you, I think, almost exactly the same amount of time as Sir Geoffrey Nice.